I'll try to remember as best as I can. For the first few weeks after birth, I think I blacked out. Probably because I wasn't sleeping, but also just because it can be a traumatic time. So I don't really remember a lot. But first question is, how soon after giving birth could you breastfeed? So before you actually get your milk in, you used to have a thing called colostrum. It's basically like a really thick, orangey, nutrient-dense version of breast milk. And that's what you have for the first 1 or 2 days of your baby's life. And your baby's stomach is about this size. Tiny little hole. You only have to fill that much. It's probably like 1 or 2 mils up to 5 mils. Maybe max. Once it's filled, then obviously the baby is digesting food a lot faster, so there's a lot of wet and dirty nappies. It's probably more frequent feeds, but not for as long as you think. I know a lot of people can be conscious of your baby not being full enough or feeling like the breast milk isn't like fatty enough. It's not satiating. Babies just digest breast milk easier, so that's why there has to be more frequent feeds, and it can almost feel like your baby is insatiable, but that's not the case at all. It's just that they can digest it a lot faster and quicker, and it's full of nutrients, so not to worry about that at all. The colostrum for the first few days does fill them up full of the best things that you can give your baby. Like, even if you can breastfeed for the first 5 days, that's brilliant as it is because of that colostrum that they're getting. And even if you don't plan to breastfeed, I would recommend trying to collect your colostrum before you even give birth. I think you can do it from 37 weeks onwards. I wish that I did that. I wasn't organized enough to do it, but it's basically you just hand express a colostrum like this onto a sterilized teaspoon, and then you can get the sterile colostrum syringes. I think you can order them online, and you fill them up and you put them in a Ziploc bag and you pop them in the freezer. So then if your baby is ever under the weather, maybe a bit congested, or if there's a flu going around, you can give them a little, you can thaw it out in warm water, pop it in their mouth or onto a teaspoon for them to drink. I found that my baby was really, she took to the things on a teaspoon way better than she did out of a syringe, if that makes sense. If it went in a syringe, she'd spit it out, but if it was off a teaspoon, she'd lick it up and swallow it. So you could try either or. My milk came in probably, it was weird because you can actually feel when your milk comes in. It's like, oh, my boob is filling with milk right now, and they feel so much heavier and almost engorged, and you will feel like, it's like the same as if when you need to give birth, when you feel like you need to push, it feels like you need to shit. It's kind of the same thing when your milk comes in, this urgency to breastfeed. You're like, I feel like my boobs are gonna explode, I need to feed, like I need to release. Mine came in the middle of the night, when I was home, and I was in the hospital for 2 nights. If that gives a better picture, I was still feeding colostrum up until the night I was home for the first time. I felt my milk coming in and it was leaking everywhere. I had my bra on with the breast pads. Like, when I was in the hospital, I either was naked or I was just in a loose t-shirt. I didn't need to wear a bra or breast pads because I wasn't leaking that much, because she was drinking all the colostrum out of me, so I wasn't leaking at all. But when my milk came in, it was like through breast pads, through the bra, through the t-shirt. Like, you will be leaking so much. There's going to be so much. Feel when your milk comes in. I can't feel I can't feel my milk coming out when I'm breastfeeding. It just feels like she's sucking on my nipple, like exactly what that you think that feels like. But I can feel when I do have letdown. So letdown is basically when the milk just squirts out on its own rather than being sucked out. So I can get it randomly throughout the day, but in the first while, you kind of feel like that all the time. It's kind of pins and needles sort of in your nipples and in your boobs. Sometimes it can be a bit sore. I only get it the odd time now because usually I make sure that I never have letdown, if that makes sense, because I'm either feeding as much as I can or pumping when there's a feed missed or if she's not feeding that much that day. But to go back to the original question, how soon after giving birth could you breastfeed? I gave birth to her. She was brought over because she was born in her meconium. Her lungs got sucked out, so she was crying a lot and she was very visibly upset and distressed. Then they tried to put her on top of me, but she was screaming so much and crying so much that she wouldn't latch. She basically was like pulling back her head and like holding her head up and screaming like this with her limbs out. They brought her back over to the warm table, which basically has a heater over it, because where I was, it was a bit colder. Anyway, so then Jason dressed her and then they brought her over again to try latch her, and the midwife that I had at that time, she just basically pinched my nipple and put it in her mouth, and then she was latched. I remember it was on this boob, was the first boob she drank out of, and then subsequently that became her favorite boob. If you start breastfeeding and they are favoritizing, they do have a favorite boob sometimes, try knock that out of them, because you can get clogged ducts then in the other one. It creates a lot more problems for you in the long run. So I made sure to keep swapping over, because when that was her favorite boob as well, this one was really sore and dry and cracked, so I had no choice but to give her the other one. Even though she would kind of give out at the beginning, I just just kept forcing it on her, and then eventually she likes them both the same now. But for a while there was just this boob was her favorite one. I breastfed her, yeah, basically as soon as she came out. And newborns, their needs are very minimal, so majority of the time if they're crying or if they're giving out, all they really want to do is feed. Most of the time they do just sleep on their own wherever they are. You don't need to like soothe them to sleep, not like when they're a bit older and you need to kind of like offer them a nap, they'll just fall asleep anywhere. Whenever she woke up in the hospital, which was probably in the first night, I'd say it was 2 or 3 times, because she was so sleepy because she was just born, and obviously birth is like a really traumatic experience for a baby too.
Do you want a cup of coffee?
Are you making coffee?
Oh, yeah. Do you want some?
Yeah. So for the first while, this was the hardest part, because I didn't know how often you were to feed them. All I know was because my stepmom told me that their stomachs are really small, to not really worry about it, because that can be your main worry when you do give birth and you're relying on breastfeeding. You kind of be stressing over if they're feeding enough. So I kind of knew that she would be full, and if she's crying, to feed her. That's really all that she needed. And also for the first night, I didn't know this until the midwife told me when I was in the hospital. For the first night, they don't actually know that they've been born yet. If you swaddle them as soon as they come out, they kind of think that they're still in the womb because they're so sleepy and their eyes aren't really focused yet. When she was in the cot next to me, I was still kind of paralyzed. So the hardest part for me when I was in the hospital was that I wasn't able to, at any cry, I wasn't able to just jump up and grab her and bring her over to me. I had to call someone, and because they're so short staffed, it was hard for a nurse to get to me on time, so I kind of had to lie there listening to my baby scream while trying to lift myself up out of the bed with one arm. I did end up having to get out of bed myself, even though it was probably so dangerous. I had to get out of bed myself and carry her in with one arm while balancing myself up with the other arm. If you can imagine trying to lift yourself out of bed when your legs don't work, to carry your baby over to your bed to breastfeed her. So that's what I did. I wish that I did sleep with her, because I was scared of bed sharing. I wish that I did sleep with her for the first night just in my bed, because I didn't sleep anyway. Like when you're on such a high, it's going to be hard for you to go back to sleep. I wish I did just have her in the bed with me. And then for the second day when Jason was there, it was good help. He could just bring her over whenever. So she was latching away, no problem. I had no problems at the beginning of her latching at all. She was just straight to it. Newborns have a natural instinct, a natural reflex to suck. The nipple actually goes kind of partly down their throat, so when they're sucking it kind of just like falls down the esophagus, which is kind of disgusting. They say to feed every 2 hours. That's not like a strict. I saw a TikTok of a woman that would strictly only feed her baby 2 hours, so even if the baby started crying for help, she would wait the 2 hour mark to feed again. That is not right at all. If you're breastfeeding, it is demand led. So if your baby is crying and if they're a newborn, it is most likely that they are hungry. Don't be worrying of overfeeding a baby. It's not really possible to, if you're breastfeeding, to overfeed a baby. If they're hungry, it's just they're hungry. You need to feed them. For the first few nights, there would be some stretches of like 4 hours where she wasn't feeding at all, but other times she'd be like feeding non-stop then for 5 hours. She did have a little bit of jaundice at the start, and this is a good tip that I actually got from TikTok. I didn't see from a midwife or anything. If they're asleep and you're conscious of waking them, to try feed them again, because when they have jaundice, the best thing to do is just keep feeding, so they basically like piss and shit it out. Because I was bed sharing, I was able to do a thing called dream feeding. Because I was bed bound, I was in bed with her, so she's there with the boob, and say she's asleep and it's been like 3 or 4 hours, maybe coming up to 5 hours, and you're conscious of them not eating enough because of jaundice, you can actually just slip a boob into their mouth and they do a thing called dream feed, so they stay asleep and suck. Like my baby, she sometimes when she's asleep, she's sucking in her sleep with nothing in her mouth, so it's very easy to just slip in and they stay asleep. Another tip as well that I found from the Lactation consultant on Instagram, her Instagram name is Nursing Mama. She makes really informative reels and posts and stories and everything. If you want to follow her, she's really good. I saw on one of her reels to keep your baby's hands out of the mittens. People might be conscious of the nails, the scratching. She's only scratched herself once, I think, on her forehead, but that was when they get a bit older, their nails get a bit thicker and harder to bite off. When I was in the hospital, I asked for a grooming kit, and the midwife said the best way to get their nails off when they're a newborn is to bite them off, because the tools are too big for them at that stage. So it's very easy because the nails are flimsy and easy to bite off. I never bit my nails as a child, so I didn't actually know how to do it in the beginning, but I got the hang of it in the end. Obviously I'm not eating the nails, I'm spitting them out after. So I bit her nails off at the start so I could keep the mitten, but I was keeping the mittens closed for the first, I think, week or two until I saw that reel, and then I didn't know that. It's easier for the baby to find where the nipple is if their hands are free, because they can move around, and also you can tell when they get a bit older they start to squeeze if the milk isn't going out fast enough, which is really cute. Or she always like grabs and pulls at my clothes, and then when they get a bit older as well, they put their hands in your mouth. Apparently it's because they want to give you something back, they want to feed you as well, so they stick their fingers in your mouth, which is really cute. Yeah, they did a study on babies where they left a newborn baby on a mama's tummy, and they found that with no intervention the baby was able to maneuver themselves up the chest and onto the boob. It's like a natural thing that they're able to get to, and in the first few weeks, and even still now to this day, she does have a better latch, and I find that she stays on the boob for longer if there's no distractions. So like, I'm not talking. She went through a phase there where I had to make eye contact with her the whole time or she would unlatch. There's loads of ups and downs throughout the time, and you like learn so much about your baby while you're breastfeeding. But when she was a newborn, she kind of like wasn't aware of her surroundings, and I don't think their hearing is like fixed properly yet, and they can't see that much. So it was kind of much easier to feed her. Like, I was able to walk around and feed her at the same time, or like sit in a restaurant and talk and have the crack at the same time while feeding her. Whereas now she gets distracted and she will unlatch. That could be just my baby, I don't know, all babies are different of course, but I find now that if she's distracted she won't have a good enough latch. When they are a newborn, I'd say in the first 3 months, I wouldn't be so strict on yourself in terms of a schedule or how long the gaps are in between feeds. Just try feed them whenever they're showing signs of being hungry. Anytime she cried, she was looking for the boob. It can be for comfort, where they're like, where's my mom? For the second night especially, for the second night after they're born, that's when they realise that they're out of the womb and they just want to be on the mama all the time. So you will be up all night. I was in the hospital, so it was kind of a bit harder. I was in a single bed. If you are home, it's probably a lot easier, but you feed for until this boob is like ran dry and empty, and then you immediately swap over. It's not like they're not really asleep. Even if they're half asleep, they're going to start crying, and when they're crying they just want the boob again. So you have to keep swapping over all night, and it is tiring, and you will be up all night. If you're a first time, you're only freshly a mom, so hopefully you have loads of energy. Like, I remember that I had so much energy. I was up for like 3 nights in a row and I was fine. It's just like a rollover. That was the only time she ever did that. And then once we got home, for the first few weeks, she would sleep at like 5-hour length intervals, because newborns sleep so much, so that's like when you actually get your sleep in. You will be surprised at how hungry they are. I remember thinking, when is this going to end? How could she still be hungry? Like, you could be finished feeding from one boob for 30 minutes and then she will still be crying. I saw a thing as well too, for when you're breastfeeding, you give lunch and dinner on one side and then you offer dessert on the other. If they're not taking the dessert, that's absolutely fine. Then you can sit them up and burp them or whatever. When they're newborn, they're actually much easier to burp than they are when they get a bit older, because they're a bit more wriggly. Like, my daughter, she always arches her back. If you try to sit her up, she like throws herself backwards because she hates like being handled. She wants to do it all on her own. But when they're a newborn, I found that if you cup their chin like this, drop and let them drop a bit forward, and then you put your hand on their lower back, and then you straighten up the back, and then they will literally let out a huge belt. When they get a bit older, it's much harder to put them in that position, but if you can get them in that position, try hold them upright and rub upwards. I found that padding only sometimes works, but I think that's like just by chance that it works. I don't know why that's still like a universal thing that people do, because I genuinely don't think that actually gets the burps up. But I found that rubbing up her back or straightening the back when they're a bit younger is much easier to get the burps out. Can you give a brief schedule your little girl followed as a newborn? Also, did you pump too? I didn't pump. You're not supposed to use an electric pump for the first 6 weeks of your breastfeeding journey. I've also heard that you're not supposed to give them anything other than the boob if you do plan to breastfeed, because they will get nipple confusion. When we did give her a dodie, she wasn't taking the boob as much and it scared the shit out of me. Got rid of the dodie then. I didn't want to let her get a dependency on it either, but now she like won't take a dodie at all, so I don't know if that has a huge effect. Obviously it's up to the parent if they want to give them a dodie. I kind of do wish sometimes now that she did have a dodie, because hey!
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks so much.
Let me know if you need anything else.
Thanks. When they're demand-led breastfeeding, they don't have a schedule at all. So I wasn't able, when they're a newborn, it's the hardest, because it's like just when you're ready to about to leave, it's always like the most inconvenient times, because it's literally relentless. You have to kind of be able to breastfeed and be prepared to breastfeed wherever you are. I've had to breastfeed her walking up and down the road in town before. I think I had less shame back then when she was a newborn, because I don't know if it was because I was sleep deprived or I was half asleep, or I think I was genuinely because I was just blacked out. I didn't know what was going on. But now I feel a lot more shame breastfeeding in public than I did then. I don't know why. And it's really annoying, because like I have so much pride being able to breastfeed my baby, and then now all of a sudden I'm like shy, even though I've been doing it for nearly 5 months. I think it's just because I'm like kind of more awake now, where I'm like conscious of people looking at me or something. I don't know. And also because when they get a bit older, they tend to like push their head back or unlatch to like talk to you or look up at you, and then your nipple is just like going to be on display. Whereas when they're a newborn, they're so like attached to you, they barely move or unlatch. So like you can do it more subtly, if that makes sense. I think that's why, I don't know. And then for the pumping, so I've heard that you're not supposed to pump using an electric pump because it can fuck up your supply, and if you have an oversupply, it's way more dangerous for yourself. So if you have an oversupply, you're at higher chance of getting clogged ducts, which can lead to mastitis and then an abscess. What I did was, when I got a haakaa, which is, a mom texted me, it was like the best thing that I ever did for the first newborn stages of breastfeeding. The haakaa is like an absolute lifesaver, and so are the ladybugs. So you will be leaking constantly because you have so much milk. Your body is getting used to how much your baby actually needs to feed, and because they're so hungry all the time, you're constantly like, the more you feed, the more milk you're going to be making. So it's the same if you want to get your supply up. Like, you kind of have to, if your baby's not feeding enough, maybe try pump as well, so that your body thinks that it needs to make more milk. So you're so engorged, so full. Like, I literally was walking around like this the whole time when she was a newborn. Even the breastfeeding bras that I wear now that are like a perfect fit for me, sometimes are too baggy for me now. Back then they were like a size too small. That's how big your boobs are, and they're so heavy and full of milk. They are really sore for the first few weeks. Like, I couldn't sleep on my tummy, and I was so excited to sleep on my tummy after being pregnant for so long, but it was really sore on my boobs. Even sometimes when I was lying on my side, they were a bit swollen. It's like the same as when you're just getting your period and your boobs are a bit swollen and tender, and the same I think if you're on the pill. It's whatever hormone that's released then. It's either progesterone or estrogen that makes your boobs sore, or it could be both, I'm not sure. So I just used the haakaa for the first few weeks or months, like 2 or 3 months of her life, to collect the letdown of the opposite breast from which I was feeding on. And then when they get a bit older, it's kind of harder to use the haakaa because she's so wriggly, and she like does this now and this, and she'll kick, and she has kicked off the haakaa a few times, so I can't really use it that often anymore. So I didn't use the electric pump only up until recently, when she started solids. So when we have to mix breast milk in with things like baby rice, I've started to pump now for the extra milk. So I use the Mom Cozy S29, I think it's called, or maybe it's just the S9. I do have the Medela pump. I got that as a present for my baby shower, but it's not hands-free. And I had no idea that. I just thought all breast pumps were hands-free for some reason, but you literally have to, oh, someone got married. You literally have to sit there and hold it. Like, that is the most I remember sitting there when I just turned it on, and I really regretted it, and then I was so angry, and this was like the height of my postpartum rage. I nearly fucked it out the window because I had to sit there holding it up against my boobs. So I never used that one again, and which is annoying because I think it's really expensive, but I had to sit there holding it. And I know there's a trick. I tried the trick where you attach it and you lengthen the strap of your bra to like stick it up and keep it in place. I was doing it when I was home alone with her. Like, I didn't have any help. I didn't have Jason here, so it was much harder for me to sit there, look after a baby, and hold the pump up against me. And then when she woke up from her nap, I had to fucking take it off, and there was milk leaking everywhere, so it just wasn't handy at all. It was such a stress to use. So then I got the Mom Cozy one, and that's really good. Like, I'm able to change the bed sheets, put a wash on, hold the baby with them in my bra, and they don't move around, and I haven't found any leakage. I do have to have them on the highest strength though to get milk out. I was putting them on the lowest at the start, and I was kind of like, there's not really any milk coming out, but then I just had to up them to the full thing. It works really, really well. I have like a milk stash, I suppose, from when she was a newborn, because I was creating so much milk. I did donate some of my milk as well, and I am interested in still donating milk, but I need to find the Human Milk for Babies group on Facebook to be able to do it, and I just haven't had the time to like make extra pumps, even though I do have the extra milk there, if that makes sense. So I bought the disposable milk sterilized milk bags to be able to do it. I thought there was a way you could like drop it to a maternity hospital, but I don't think you can actually do that. I think you have to like fill out a form and all this other stuff. But anyway, yeah, so I have a freezer stash for her from when she was a newborn. The composition of your breast milk changes with your growing baby. I wasn't collecting anything from the first like 2 weeks because I was on antibiotics, and you can increase your chance of a baby getting oral thrush if you're on antibiotics. So I was taking a probiotic as well with that. That's also another tip. If you have to go on antibiotics, you can give your baby thrush from breastfeeding. But I took the probiotics, and she showed no signs of getting thrush, so she was fine. How do you find breastfeeding in public? Any tips in general? So when I have been shy, I found that basically I unclip my bra while my top is still on, like this, pull it down, and then I'll put my baby in front of me, and then you can put a muslin cloth. Usually I just hold it with my teeth, so I hold the muslin cloth with my teeth. So I hold it like this, and then it's kind of covering me, and I'll put her underneath it. Like, the muslin cloth has holes, like it's cellular, so she can still breathe underneath. Put her in position, and then I can pull my top up, let her latch. Sometimes I'll take it away if I'm feeling confident. If I am feeling really shy, I'll just put the muslin like there and keep a kind of gap so she can see me, because she gets freaked out obviously if it's like pitch black under there. But sometimes in public, if she's overstimulated, I find that she likes it more when things are a bit more blocked out for her, so she can like concentrate or something. Sometimes muslin cloth is good for that as well. So that's what I found found works best for me when breastfeeding in public. The only time there was like a creepy situation was when I was breastfeeding her when she was a newborn. I was in Boots waiting for one of my prescriptions to come through, and they have like little seats next to the prescription place, and I was just breastfeeding her there as normal, sitting down because my fucking vagina was so sore. And there was a weird man who just kept like walking up and down the aisles, like pretending to look for stuff, but was like clearly, very clearly staring at me. That was the only time I've had a bad experience, but other than that, everything has been great. Everyone's been so welcoming and like not making me feel weird, like just treating it as if it's normal. I like when people still acknowledge that there's a baby in there. You know, it makes me feel more awkward when people are clearly like trying not to look at it. I think it's beautiful and natural. Like I'm not like, oh, don't look at my tits, you know. I'm just like, I'm feeding my baby. I want to is the word desexualize? I want to desexualize my boobs, so I don't care about people looking when I'm breastfeeding my baby, because they're being used for their function then, and it's not in like a sexual way. I've actually never seen a man breastfeed before I started breastfeeding. I don't know any mams in my life that breastfed. Yeah, I'd never seen a man breastfeed before, other than like the odd time in public, and even at that it was a rarity, and I only saw it for the first time, and maybe I saw it when I was younger but I don't remember, or maybe I just didn't acknowledge it because I didn't care. But the only time I saw it was when I saw a mum out with her newborn in town and she was breastfeeding, and I was like, it made me really happy because I was pregnant at the time, and I was like, oh, I can't wait to do that with my baby. I've breastfed like almost everywhere I've gone. The only place I kind of felt uncomfortable was on the train. If you had another child, would you tandem feed? No, I'm not undecided yet if I want to have kids or when I want to have another kid. I'm just like busy loving her at the moment, and also the thought of having more kids, I'm like, I don't want to love, I don't know how it makes sense. I'm like, I don't know if I would be able to love anyone as much as I love her, and I'd like feel guilty. I don't know, it's a weird feeling. I don't know how things will pan out, but I would hope that if we do plan to have kids in the future, that I would wait until she's like 2, and I do want to breastfeed her until she's 2. I wouldn't want to have a baby sooner than that. I wouldn't want to tandem feed. I don't think I'd be able. My auntie who had twins breastfed her babies at the same time at one of those in the rugby hold position. She would breastfeed the two of them like this. Queen. How many times a day do you breastfeed? Now that she's nearly 5 months, I would say it's like 6 to 10 times, depending on the day. Sometimes she's hungrier than others.
Should I change her in here or should I?
No, you can change her in here. I'll just pause it. When she was a newborn, it was literally non-stop. Like I wouldn't even be able to count. It was constant. Probably the equivalent of every 5 minutes. Like I'd probably get 5 minutes without her, if that makes sense. Probably 6 to 10 times. Initially in the beginning, you kind of get worried. It's almost as if one day they'll just like, no, I don't need to be fed that much, and your boobs will shrink down back to their sort of like, I think they're at pregnancy size now rather than back to my normal size. I think if I stop breastfeeding, they'll probably go down way more. They're still like big enough, but they're not as big as they are when after you first give birth and your milk comes in. They're like crazy big then, like almost too big. Initially you get kind of worried that they're not eating enough, and they're like, oh god, I thought that she was self-weaning. Some babies do that where they all of a sudden they won't take the boob and all they want is a bottle and solids, and they won't take the boob anymore. And I thought I was like, Jesus fucking Christ, it's very young for her to be self-weaning, but it was just because she had just started teething. Obviously when they get a bit older they don't need to feed as much because the composition of your breast milk has changed and it gets a lot fattier. And I found that when she was, babies also go through a phase in their newborn stage. I'd say she was around, it was probably between 8 to 10 weeks. It probably only lasted 1 to 2 weeks as well. They go through a phase of trying to figure out what their appetite is. It kind of regulates and it realizes that it's been feeding so much and the digestive system slows down a little bit more, so they're not like shitting it out straight away, so all of a sudden their stomach is getting really full really fast. She would feed and overfeed herself and then projectile vomit, and this was happening like 3 times a day, like the biggest puke you never think of, all over me, all over the floor, all over the ground. But it wasn't anything. I went to the pediatrician and it wasn't anything to worry about because she was still gaining weight. She was getting feeds in between those times, like she was feeding a lot, but it was just the times where she was overfeeding she would puke it up straight away. If you're getting 0 to 3 months clothes, that's, I'd say I'd recommend buying the most vests and sleep suits in, because there's so many messes, like explosive shits, and they're going to be puking a lot more. She was trying to figure out her appetite, and also I was trying to figure out when she was full. I know that when their hands are in her fist, it means that they're hungry, and when their hands relaxed, it means that they're full. When she was full, I would try to sit her up then so that the food would kind of make its way down rather than make its way up, but sometimes it would be hard to tell, and then all of a sudden she would just like puke on me. It is completely normal. It's not normal if they're puking and then getting distressed and crying after. It could be reflux, so that's when you should go to your doctor. She was gaining weight on a healthy rate, so it wasn't anything to worry about, and also it didn't last that long. It was like 1 or 2 weeks. Nowadays, if she's not feeding as much, I do still, even if she's not giving hungry clues, even if she's not giving out, I will try offer the boob or offer the baby rice, and if she doesn't want to take it, that's fine, but as long as you're offering it, she could be hungry and not making any cues at all, because sometimes she has days where she's just not hungry, and she'll, like, I'd say there was a day there 2 weeks ago where she probably only ate 3 times in one day, and then she'd be up all night that night trying to like make up for it or something. But it was just like, I don't know, whatever happened that day, maybe she was teething really bad or something, but she wasn't interested in eating at all. If they're a newborn, or even now as well, if you try offer the boob and they're still giving out or throwing their head back, even though they're giving hungry cues, they could be hungry but also have trapped wind. Sometimes that happens. That happened a lot when she turned 3 months, I think. I would try feed her, and then she'd be throwing her head back and screaming, crying, and then latching again, and then throwing her head back and crying. That means that they have trapped wind. So I would do the bicycle legs where it went like this, and then pull back forward, and then make it around. I found that she'd release gas more if I was doing the roundy ones. So if this isn't working, the pull back and push, try going around, moving their legs around like this. That really helps release gas. Do you wake up with sore boobs, soon to be first time mama? This was it. I'd say in the first few weeks you do wake up with sore boobs. It's just that because they're engorged. Now, I wore a bra for 4 months straight, like going to bed and everything. I'd say that is one of the main downsides of breastfeeding, is not being able to just free the boobs. Like, you have to wear a supportive bra, otherwise you will leak everywhere and it would just be unsupportive. I have heard of people wearing breastfeeding tank tops to bed, which can be a lot more comfortable, and you can slip a breast pad in them and they also clip down. I might get one of those for the summer, but at the moment now I was like fuck it. One night a few weeks ago I was like, I'm not wearing a bra to bed anymore. So sometimes I still do get a bit of letdown from the opposite boob when I'm breastfeeding out of the other one at night time, so I just kind of like bunch up a muslin cloth and place it over my boob instead when I'm half asleep. There's no chance I would have been able to not wear a bra in the first few months of breastfeeding her in bed, because breast milk would literally go everywhere. Like, even, yeah, it was going everywhere anyway. Sometimes I was leaking through my breast pad, through my bra, and through my top. Sometimes I'd go through like 3 breast pads a day, whereas now I could probably wear the same breast pad for 2 days. Does it hurt a lot at the start, or do you think it's different for everyone? I definitely do think it's different for everyone. If it's sore when they're latched, especially after the first week, if it's still sore, like a pinching pain, it's probably to do with the latch of the baby. So they could have tongue tie or lip tie, and I would get it checked out by a doctor. I know of a mom whose baby had tongue tie. This is like a good story, a good positive story. If your baby has tongue tie and then will only take a bottle, eventually after the baby was being bottle fed for the first few months of breast milk, then randomly one day just latched onto the boob, so she was still able to then breastfeed. In case anyone gets disheartened by a baby having lip or tongue tie, you can get it sorted out and you can still continue to breastfeed eventually after. If a baby has lip or tongue tie, or if you have inverted or flat nipples, it can be really hard for the baby to latch, or it can be really painful. She didn't have lip or tongue tie, but I did just this boob, not really, it was the favorite boob for the first week. This boob was like, I would audibly say ow whenever she latched onto it. I'd go like ow, but after you give birth you're kind of like, nothing can hurt me anymore. Like the pain of that compared to contractions, I'm just like, I can go through anything and it's absolutely fine. They were kind of dry and cracked, so I was using the Nursing Mama nipple butter, which you can continue to breastfeed even with it still on. You don't have to wipe it off. Some nipple creams you have to wipe off before you can feed your baby, and when they're a newborn that's not really viable, because like I would put it on and then she'd be hungry immediately after, you know, like she would unlatch and then I'd put it on and then she'd be hungry again, and I found that she didn't really like the taste of it. Sometimes she wouldn't really latch onto it. When I had it on, I actually would have to wipe it off. That one really helped. Also, you can get the Silverettes nipple caps. They're really good if you have sore nipples for the first few weeks. Oh yeah, I used the Multi-Mam compresses. I kept them in the fridge and I would put that on the sore boob for a few minutes, and you can breastfeed while after having that on as well. Oh, it was such a relief. I swear to God, it only lasted like 1 week, so it's nothing really to worry about. I don't have sore nipples now at all. Sometimes I get sore, like I I'd have a sore nipple when she bites me. The odd time she stopped biting me now, but when she went through a phase of biting me when she was teething, it would only hurt when she bit me, but it didn't hurt afterwards, if you know what I mean. That's not to scare people either. I've heard of moms who've had teething babies the same age as my baby and they didn't bite at all. I don't know, for some reason she's just a biter. Your baby can't bite you if they're latched properly. So the problem was I just needed to pay more attention to when she had unlatched. If they're latched properly, they physically cannot bite because the way their tongue is placed or something. So she was feeding and then she'd kind of get a bit sore and she'd kind of go like, she'd do a whine and then she'd bite down. So I knew when it was about to come. When I would hear her do the little whine, you'd hold a finger, say she was latching this one, I'd have a finger and I'd push it in her mouth so that she'd bite down on my finger instead, and then I'd get her off my boob. Now sometimes if like, say if I was eating my dinner and breastfeeding her at the same time, it was hard for me to notice when she'd unlatched. Those were the times when she bit me, but I would just take her off because it's really hard. That was probably the hardest part of my mental health of my breastfeeding journey, was when she was biting me, because of like my child was literally hurting me. And it was also something I just wasn't prepared for. Like I was prepared for the relentlessness of it, that it was potentially going to hurt because of the latching, not that she was actually going to bite me herself, you know. And it is really painful, and it also just gives you a big fright. Like it's really scary. So yeah, I would just take her off and give her to Jason and then kind of have a breather to myself, because it was really upset. The first times I was like crying and everything, it was really upsetting, but now I'm just kind of like, ow, you know, it's fine. I'm like more used to it. But she has stopped recently. What we did do, this was one of the tips I got in my group chat. If you can get a link from your maternity hospital when you give birth to join QIDU, the support group. I'm in a QIDU breastfeeding support group. I think there's ones for just general mother support, like you don't have to be a breastfeeder to be able to be a part of it, but they do it in terms of your area. So like my area in Dublin has a specific group chat, and you can ask about anything and everything in there. But one of the tips I got from there was to massage the gums, your baby's gums, before you feed, or if they've bitten you, to take them off and then massage their gums and then try again, because sometimes they just need to release and, you know, bite down on something. So what I did was, I have this like silicone little thing that goes on your finger. It comes in the, you know, the grooming kits that you get from Boots. So I put that on my finger, obviously sterilized, it'd be boiled, and then I put a thing of Tida gel on it, and then I would massage her gums for like 10 minutes or something, and you would find that she's really fucking chomping down. So that's how you know that they're teething really bad. And then I would try feed her again and then she'd have no problem. But if I was massaging her gum still giving out and she was still getting upset, or if she bit me again, then we'd give her Calpol. Or if obviously she was crying in pain, like a lot of times she'd be crying and we're like, oh shit, does she need Calpol, is she in pain? And then you'd find that she just needs to release gas. So that's why I wait until the last minute to give her Calpol, because I'd be scared of like getting her reliant on Calpol even when she's just like needs to burp or has an itchy foot, you know. If a baby is on breast milk, could they have other milk as a once off, like one baby chino? And then this person also did a follow-up question, like, can you give them oat milk? So a baby can only have formula or breast milk up until they're 1, and then you can give them like follow-on milk. I don't know if you can give them whole cow's milk. I'm not sure. She won't be getting whole cow's milk. I'll probably do a follow-on oat milk and soy milk. I'll probably be giving her oat milk, but I will be breastfeeding her until she's 2. If she's thirsty or if she wants like extra milk, I can probably supplement with the follow-on oat milk once she's 1. But I do plan to like pump and breastfeed her as well. I've heard horror stories of like a baby's in-law minding them, and then the in-law gives them formula when the baby's been exclusively having breast milk, and then the baby won't go back to drinking breast milk, it only wants the formula. I think you do have to be conscious of that. I'm not sure if that's a thing with every baby. I'm not going to try it, so I don't know. I was planning on pumping to try bottle feeder and to wean her onto the bottles. I didn't even know this was going to be an issue, but the baby obviously just prefers the boob. Like obviously you'd prefer the freshly squeezed over the fucking carton stuff. So if you think about it, like it comes out warm, you get to be on top of your mommy, it's at the right temperature, it's fresh, like, you know what I mean? So obviously the baby's going to prefer the boob. So I didn't realize that I was going to have to wean her onto bottles. We've tried like every single bottle under the sun. I've been buying like expensive bottles that are literally 30 quid a pop. I do the glass ones so that they're okay.
Sorry. Do you know where Jay's interface is? He said he leaves it on the couch, so maybe you moved it.
His interface? Yeah. I think it's in the random drawer, you know, on top of the chest of drawers. I think it's in there.
Okay.
I tried like the Tommy Tippee, I tried the Nook and Man bottles, and then I was like, I don't want to give her plastic ones because like I've heard of microplastics like getting into the milk or whatever. That could be just me being fucking, what's the word, neurotic. That could be me being neurotic. But anyway, I moved to a glass bottle and they're much cuter as well, but they're obviously more expensive. But I think they last longer too. But we moved to the bibs bottles and she seems to prefer it, if that makes sense. Like, she will take it for a few seconds and then she's kind of like, I know this isn't my mam, so give me my fucking mam right now. And she'll boots the house down and scream for me and be really annoyed then after she realizes that the milk is not coming out of a boob. So that is the trouble with the weaning. It's just like your baby will cry while doing it, which is probably why we haven't been persistent in it at all. I've heard that if you want to wean, you can heat up the teat, and I'm not the person to ask for advice on this. There's probably videos on the internet on how to wean your baby properly, but I'm really bad at it. It's to try every day. The mam can't be in the room. Even better if the mam's outside of the house. You can heat up the teat, make sure the breast milk is at the perfect temperature and as freshly squeezed as possible. So it could be like you just pumped it there and then give it to them. She will take a bottle for me though sometimes, which is really weird. Like when she was teething and the biting had gotten really bad, I gave her a bottle and she was actually taking it for me. But I had her in the breastfeeding position, so I think she just like didn't know she was not getting the boob because she still got my scent. I didn't realize how hard it was going to be to wean her, so it's almost like not worth it for me. I just don't want to. I want to exclusively breastfeed until she's 6 months, so I don't care until then. But I think it will get a bit easier when she's on solids because I have bigger gaps in between of her feeds. Like, she's going to get fuller quicker, and she loves the baby rice, and she seems to be really interested in food. She has a thing where she's slow to develop the reaching out, what's that, reflex? Like, she doesn't, in her brain, when she wants to touch something, she goes to it with her head. Like when she's in her buggy and she wants to be lifted up, she goes like this with her head instead of like lifting her arms up to be lifted up, if that makes sense. If you hold something in front of her, she doesn't reach it for her with her hand. She goes for it with her head. So if you like sit her down in the chair and put food in front of her, she's like this. I don't know what is going on there, but hopefully that'll come in time, I'm sure. But anyway, so that's one of the main issues with the baby-led weaning. I can't really let her hold, can't hold things and put stuff in her mouth yet. She only puts her fists in her mouth, but she doesn't, it's weird. Like, she can put her fists in her mouth and she can hold her hands in front of her, but she can't reach forward. So like, even when she's going to pet Missy Moo, like she's dying to pet Missy Moo, when she sees her, she smiles and like starts panting and everything, but she like goes with her head towards her. Do you have to feed your baba to sleep? I have a 3-month-old who will only fall asleep with Nip. Yeah, when she was a newborn, sometimes she would fall asleep on Jason, but then when he went back to work, it kind of fucked up her sleeping habits. Are you okay?
Can I get something?
Yeah.
Am I too distracted?
No.
I think my interface is in there.
You think it's here?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and you tried the drawer?
Yeah.
The random drawer, yeah?
Yeah, Sarah should try it as well.
Like, I'm gonna go in there and I'm gonna find it the first place I look.
No, I don't want to distract you from your video.
I'll help.
No.
Only sometimes. Initially, she was able to fall asleep if she was on Jason or if he walked her around, but now she only falls asleep if she's either in the buggy or if I'm breastfeeding her. The buggy has made it much easier because like we can put it in the buggy during the day, even if we don't leave the house, and just kind of rock her, and she'll fall asleep in there, and then I have a bit of freedom to move around. Whereas initially, when she was a newborn, she would only contact nap, but I would give yourself that time for the first 3 months anyway to relax into it. I wish I didn't feel guilty in the first stages of the contact napping because I felt like I had to be productive when I literally just had a baby. It was so stupid. So I wish at the start I just like enjoyed it while I was there and just like relaxed, like I'd just given birth. I don't know, I was just like wanting to get up and do things, and obviously if you have a messy house or whatever, it's much harder, and you do feel a lot guiltier when you're contact napping, but like it's good for your bonding and their development to be able to do that. But if you are getting to the stage where it's just like it's been going on for a bit long, I would try the buggy thing. If I ever have to go out and do stuff, she will fall asleep. She doesn't really sleep in the carrier anymore because she's tall enough now that her head pops out, so she likes to have a look around. She only likes the car seat version of the buggy. She doesn't like the flat one because she likes to be able to see us. So if they are crying in the buggy, I would also leave them in the car seat one rather than the flat one. If she's awake and is not showing any tired signs, I'll leave the hood down of the buggy because she likes to look around. And at night time, obviously I bed chair. At night time, we're watching TV, and usually the way she falls asleep is that I'm breastfeeding her and holding her. So I'll walk her in here, pull down the covers, gently put her down like this. Gently put her down, I'll go down my side, she stays asleep, she stays asleep, she stays asleep. I'll pop the boobs back in her mouth. She'll go for like 10 minutes more, and then I'll slowly take it out, and then that's her like out for the night. Well, not out for the night, she wakes up like 3 or 4 times in the night to feed, and then I can like get ready for bed, make my nighttime tea, I can read next to her. At the start I was like, oh Jesus, I don't know how to get ready for bed, because she woke up every time I put her down. That's the best way I found, is to just put her down very, very gently, because if she can smell you and she knows that she's not being left on her own, she'll most likely stay asleep. Do you just use let down catchers or also pump? I just do a pump now once a day. I don't use the letdown catheters because I don't really leak that much. How long do you plan to breastfeed for? 2 years. How to stick with style while breastfeeding? I struggle wearing fave jumpers now, fall on baby's face. What can help is, I initially was scared to wear stuff with a high neckline. I always thought that I had to wear like this so I could take my boob out that way, if that makes sense. But it's actually way more subtle or something, way more, you get more privacy if you pull up and breastfeed. I always thought you had to pull down. Like when she was a newborn, I basically was just naked the fucking whole time, and it was still summer, so I was kind of just wearing a bra around the house maybe sometimes. Now I just pull up my top and take it out. Yeah, for jumpers, one of my main things that I love now in the winter are zip things. So I love my fleece and I love cardigans. So this is from Beyond Retro, it's vintage. I think I have 2 other cardigans, or like a bolero. They're like the best things because it still keeps you warm, but also it's like open, so you can just pull up your top easily for the baby. I never really wear hoodies or jumpers anymore because they are so annoying and get in their face. That's probably the only thing. Like I wouldn't wear a hoodie that hangs below my bum just because there's way too much fabric to be holding up. But I did find that if you get like a claw clip for your hair, roll it up and then claw clip your jumper or whatever up here. Any tips that helped you in the early days? The lying down position is probably the best, especially if you're recovering from a C-section scar. I know it can be really hard to have them in the cradle position. I wasn't able to sit up properly, so I had to be lying down and swapping over. Their tummy has to be up against your tummy. Sometimes the whole position thing, it was really daunting at the start, because when people try to explain it to you verbally without showing like a picture, it's really hard to imagine it in your head, and I was getting fucking freaked out. A tip that really helped me is that if you touch the nipple with their up against their nose, this is so they get a good deep latch, because if they get a shallow latch, it's really sore in their nipples. If you touch the nipple on their nose and then you go like this and kind of tickle their mouth with it, so go side to side, and then they'll start doing this. Newborns, like, I don't know why they do this, but they like shake their head side to side to try find the nipple or something, but they'll open up really wide and go like this, and then they'll have a really good deep latch. Shoving the nipple into the closed mouth like isn't going to help, and you'll find that their lips like curl in like this. That's not good, and it's probably going to pinch and hurt you. If anyone has any more questions, do leave them in the comments and I'll try to answer as best as I can. Obviously it's best that if there's any other problems outside of what I've talked about, it's best to go to a lactation consultant. I'm just speaking from my experience because people were interested, and also it's good to know what different people go through, because every baby is different, every nipple is different, every breastfeeding parent is different. So it's good to get a different perspective from other people and to like talk to people that you know that are going through the same things as you. So I do recommend joining your Quidju group if you are in Ireland. For more information, go on Lactation League. I do think that a huge issue as to why a lot of moms don't breastfeed is because there's no like working options to do it simultaneously. I do think that I'm in a lucky position that I can work from home, so that's what makes it so much easier for me to breastfeed. I don't think if I had to go back to work now, and because maternity pay in Ireland is so bad, it's like €250 a week, I literally wouldn't be able to survive off that. Like that's basically the same as my rent and bills. I would have to like go back to work. I didn't take any maternity pay. I'm self-employed, so I just continued to work through it, and I had a bit of savings as well, so I think I took 2 weeks off and then continued on. I think that's a big reason as to why a lot of moms don't breastfeed, because there's no option, and I'm sure a lot of people would take that opportunity if there was sufficient pay for them to stay home for the actual full year and be able to breastfeed their baby. Legally, your job has to provide time and space for you to pump, like a designated pumping time for you to get breast milk for your baby. And I have heard of moms who can breastfeed in the morning, go to work, and the baby bottle feeds with pumped milk, and then they can breastfeed through the night as well.